Welcome everyone. I'm Nikhil John, Senior Director Marketing at C5I, and will be your host for today. Thank you for joining us today's LinkedIn Live on the explainability and interoperability of GenAI models. This is in continuation from our last C5I Compass GenAI series session, which we had conducted in May, where we spoke about the best practices on building a generative AI COE. Today's session is designed to provide you with practical examples and techniques that showcase the power and potential of generative models in real-world scenarios. Additionally, we will help you learn how to make AI models understandable and discover ways to integrate them smoothly into existing systems to enhance both trust and efficiency. Now, a little bit about us. These are exciting times at C5I. Following our rebranding in May this year, on Monday, we announced the acquisition of Analytic Edge, a premier provider of AI-based marketing analytics solutions to further strengthen our integrated analytics and AI capabilities. For those of you who are new to what we do, C5I is a pure-play AI and analytics provider that combines the power of human perspective with AI technology to deliver trustworthy intelligence. The company drives value through a comprehensive solution set, integrating multifunctional teams that have technical and business domain expertise with a robust suite of products, solutions, and services tailored for various horizontal and industry specific use cases. At the core, C5's focus is to deliver business impact at speed and scale by driving adoption of AI assisted decision making. Let's turn to the housekeeping items. A recording will be available on our LinkedIn events page for those who have registered for the event. We will send a webinar recording and post-webinar summary highlighting all the key takeaways. We will have the last 10 minutes dedicated for Q&A. We urge you to ask questions at any time using the comment section. In addition, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach us at scalewithgenai@c5.ai. Now, coming to our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Chiranjeev Roy. With a PhD in ML and AI, Dr. Chiranjeev Roy has led data science and AI initiatives for over 2 decades now, driving digital transformation across sectors like CPG, automotive, retail, and manufacturing across Fortune 100 companies. He has developed advanced analytic products, mentored startups, and received numerous industry accolades and patents. He currently heads the data sciences and applied AI practice for C5I. Hi, Dr. Roy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. Our second speaker is Sushant Ajmani. Sushant is a seasoned digital analytics professional who has been working in the industry for close to 24 years now. He has worked with over 180 plus global brands in banking, insurance, retail, CPG, and media domains across 17 plus countries and is currently driving the generative AI practice at C5I. Hi, Sushant. Welcome.
So glad to be here, guys. Yeah.
Lovely. So, without much ado, let's dive straight into the session. Dr. Roy, my first question is for you. While explainability and interoperability are important topics within generative AI, they are not currently the most talked about, surprisingly. So, in your opinion, why is it so important?
Fantastic thing. Machine learning over a long time, right? So since the Second World War, Alan Turing developed the first AI machine. Until date, there has been a constant push to develop or look at technologies. We have been focusing on majorly technological challenges till now. But what has happened with generative AI coming into picture, and just a bit before that, has been primarily towards, okay, which algorithm should be working better? Which are the ones where we should be focusing about, right? Now, in this area, the researchers and the researching community has been constantly upgrading or finding the best state of the art model, which we call as SOTA, right? In the data science, or anybody who works in that space primarily talks about which is the state of the art. Now, one of the most important aspects, right, which today people focus on and why it is important right now is people are not questioning which algorithms will be giving me an accuracy between 98% to 100%. How can I go from 96 to 99.8? What is more important comes into picture today, right, is are these models transparent? Do we have user trust and safety? Do we have, for the people who are developing this, for developers to be precise, whoever is as in is using them, right, do we have debugging and improvement facilities? And then finally, as we have been all talking about, is the regulatory compliances. So that these are the four major corners of why explainability has been becoming one of the most intricate areas. While machine learning had multiple um, algorithms, statistical algorithms, statistically we have been trying to test things, right, about the models. The leaps and bounds of how AI and the usage of models to actually create AI solutions have become much more. Transparency, we are looking at growing complexity, right, understanding how these models will like generate output, making decisions much more challenging. Explainability will actually try and demystify these processes, right. The trust factor comes into areas of, okay, if the content is created, if a decision has to be made, right, a decision enabler has to be created, the outputs needs to be reliable and safe, right, for people to work upon. And there are multiple examples, right, that has been coming up. So that means the models that we build, they're rational, should help us to build trust and address the concerns without biases and errors. It's a continuous working activity. From a developer's point of view, right, um, certain output needs to be questioned when they are produced, right. How would you go ahead and facilitate troubleshooting, right? Is there a feedback loop? If there is a feedback loop, then what are the iterative improvements that you can continuously do so that the model performance can be managed as per the expectation? And finally, as we know, right, the regulatory is about all the transparency that brings into picture. There are multiple questions which have been asked till date on this area, right, and it will be continuously questioned. I think these are the four major areas which have evolved quite well, and there are multiple discussions being happening on. And this will be one of the key focus areas that would be challenging everybody, not just a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, going down to the consumer itself, right? So from a business analyst to a CXO, everybody will be questioning on that, and we all should be questioning it.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. Who would have imagined that it has such a wide-ranging spectrum of applications? I'd like to pass this on to Sushant as well to get his perspective on why he feels this is a very, very important space today.
So Dr. Roy has covered the four different facets from explainability point of view. There's one more thing I would like to add here. Uh, so Dr. Roy and I went on multiple client programs, and lately what we have seen is that clients are asking some really intelligent questions because every program that we run for them, it all starts with a proof of concept, or it all starts with a minimum viable product. Water out. It's a very new field. Okay, companies are not making bigger bets here because they still want to see what is that impact on the critical business metrics. And the only way they would be able to scale from an MVP to a large scale adoption once they have what's under the hood. Okay, how we have been training, what are some of the nuances, what parameters we are tuning in, why we are making certain assumptions. And once they have an understanding about our fine tuning approach, our parameter optimization approach, once they have a good assumptions that we are taking, it will give them a better understanding about how we operate and how we deliver the results to them. And that will gradually start building up their confidence and their focus in terms of how to take it to the next level. Yeah.
Thanks, Sushant. On that very note, I wanted to share that, when I was looking at the audience who've registered for today's event, we've got a really diverse audience. including business teams, AI practitioners, data scientists, and who are at different stages of their Gen AI journey. And that's what you were talking about. Like, what is this going to impact in terms of the end user? So, what, in your opinion, Sushant, are the main challenges in making multimodal models work together, and how can organizations solve these problems effectively?
See, there are different areas the problems fall into. See, interoperability subject. Uh, See, we all have worked in the web-based application world in our previous lives. And if I go back into the previous organization I was working with at Zeta, we were constantly focusing on interoperability as one of the key focus, because the way the developers community work today, every engineer wants to work in their own comfortable environment. Okay, you will see certain developers like to work on Python and Django, certain developers like to work on maybe Java and Spring Boot framework, some work on maybe traditional PHP based model. Now, when you have different sets of engineers working together and building some application which all needs to talk to each other, which all needs to cohesively start acting like a one end-to-end workflow, what you need is, okay, just like during the networking days, the TCP/IP revolutionized the way the networking works. In today's interoperability world, concepts like, okay, why don't we have some kind of a web services as a framework? Why can't we have REST APIs enabling two disjointed or different applications each other? Or more rudimentary knowledge example would be like an XML file or a JSON object. Okay, so those are some of the things through which makes some of the different applications connect to each other. Now, if I bring the same flavor into our LLM world, not very different. Okay. For example, some of the challenges could be around data representation and standardization. Okay. Let me give an example. Let's say if you are in the life sciences vertical, let's say you're building a healthcare application where your application is based on an LLM model behind the patient's data, including their medical images, which could be your X-rays, your MRI scans, your CT scans, and maybe some electronic health records, which is pure play text. And then you have your patient doctor communications or some kind of interviews which have happened, which are all video recordings. Now, just imagine you have scans on one hand, you have video recordings on one hand, you have patient health records, which is completely text. And all these are around different formats. Images are usually in the format of DICOM, medical records would be in the format like FHIR, your audio or video recordings could be an audio codecs. Now, just imagine when you have different types of data representation, different formats, how would you make them cohesively talk to each other? How would you bring them at the same level? And thanks to the open MME kind of standards, which are trying to common protocol of interaction between them. Okay. Other challenges could be around model integration and compatibility. Okay. Classic e-commerce example, you have an e-commerce website. If you go to a product page, you have different types of product images. If I want to analyze the images, I have one type of model. If I want customer reviews and sentiments, I have an NLP based models. If I have a product recommendation engine kind of models. Okay. So the same website, different types of models playing behind the scene. And now if I want to make them talk, it's a big challenge. So again, you need some standard default for these two talks. So like this, ethical and fairness consideration is a bigger challenge. Your computational resources and efficiency is a bigger challenge. Okay, how to make these models evaluate on a common set of benchmarks, the way Hugging Face is doing that. Every open source model that gets listed there, they have to meet for them to have been classified there and get placed in the leaderboard and get have a better adoption. So these are some of the things which are some of the diverse challenges which are for pushing the engineering community, that how they need to challenge the status quo and start working towards interoperability across these models, not just in one domain, but across multiple domains. Yeah.
Thanks, Sushant, and thanks for sharing such a diverse set of challenges across industries. I personally like the or really love the healthcare one. Dr. Roy, while my predictions may not match the accuracy of the Gen AI models we are discussing, I can sense you have some insights to share with us in this context.
No, very well. Sushant, while um, I love the pattern of interoperability because it is all about, it is majorly about how communicative can be across the scale. That's why you come with the value, right? I think I will touch point on the data science community, right? And I'll start from there. See, um, we all know, and some of us know, and a lot of people would be knowing, whoever is getting into this, right? And I'll very specifically focus on generative artificial intelligence for today, because if I call about artificial intelligence today, right, as in 90% of the focus will be non-traditional or generative artificial intelligence, primarily, let's say, large language model for today, right? See, particularly these large language models, right, GPT-3, GPT-4, right, it started with BERT, Google came out with it, and then its successors. It has a complex and opaque nature. By nature, these models are very complex, right? For which you need to understand the methods, right? You need to interpret their behaviors, how they decide, because you're just giving an input and getting an output, right? Whatever is happening in between primarily is a black box, right? Because of the massive scale and the sheer intricate architecture which makes them difficult to interpret, we don't want to get into it. We just use it and try to make it as versatile as possible, chase the accuracy game. But accuracy is neither interoperability or explainability. Let's please try to understand that. And I think what is more important is, while anybody is taking or creating a process, for example, healthcare, these are extremely decision oriented games, right? I come from an autonomous driving world or manufacturing, right? I'll give an example on top of it, right? Are all decisions equal to saving a life of a human being, right? With using a healthcare system, let's say clinical trial, versus, let's say, you are driving an autonomous car where the car has to take a decision to change a lane, right, or save a human being. Those are might be highest parameters of decision making bodies, right? It majorly talks about the model's performance and its trade-offs, right? That's very important. Technically, you need to see at least three things when it comes to explainability, right? One is you need to understand the attentions. Basically, see, this entire game of Gen AI was started with attention is what you seek, right? That's what where everything started with. So that means you need to understand the attention weights, right, which are part of the input of the model itself, right? Then you have the most important ones, which are sharp and line, right? These are very very old philosophical, traditionally statistical, and then converted into machine learning features, which gives you importance by every feature. See, this entire world is all about features, basically the factors to the features game. And then once you have an output, you need to provide as explanations on simpler examples, right, and analogies through which the model has been trained on the data, because that's being constantly changed. So let's try to see. I'll try to give some examples. For example, let's say from I would give some examples with respect to, let's say, let's take supply chain for an example, right? We all have been doing forecasting and demand forecasting, to be precise, for a long time. So let's say you are today employing a generative model to do demand forecasting, right? So these explainability tools, when you take Shapley values and so on and so forth, you can help any user visualize how these different factors like trends, your promotional activities, are impacting the forecasted demand, right? And and then when we understand these influences at every level, from a business analyst to a CXO, they can go ahead and fine tune their inventory. Now, this, when tied up with the generative model together, can give you a lot of leverage, because the major power of LLM comes into picture, where you can interpret and see what is the causal behavior, how caused it is, right? How it can be explained, because a lot of people mix causality with explainability itself. So that's why I'm putting this word into the picture. Let's say one of the other most important ones, right, used in extremely very well, let's say manufacturing, is predictive maintenance. We all need to track the equipments, right, their failures. So explainability technique like Shapley values and attention maps, right, it can make you understand the temperatures, the vibration levels, right, which are influencing the predictions, right. So if you can mix Shapley values with LM, right, then engineers could prioritize these maintenance activities. And we have been doing it for quite some time, right? It just needs to come much more often. And this can lead to significant, not just cost saving and improved efficiency, which these use cases are made to do, but it will give you more explainability. So if you are a data scientist working for a manufacturing company, you're going to a plant, you can easily make anybody understand, right, using the combination of both of them, to a plant manager basically, who has no relationship with data science itself, right. These are some of the cohesive examples, and when you mix both of them, the power will come into picture. People will not give, or people will not question the trust factor of these models itself basically, right. But please do understand that the 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 track of the models today, in the actual applied world, let's say Hugging Face or whoever has been trying to track the model, the primary objective is to make the accuracy better. Accuracy is not equal to interoperability or explainability. It needs to be done by use cases. We all have to come together to do it. These are some of the examples, and we'll continue from here. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. And those are some really interesting use cases. So before I get to my third question, and I know we have time for just one more question before we take questions from the audience, I would urge everyone who's attended today's session to please feel free to post your questions in the comment section, so that we can dedicate the last 10 minutes to Dr. Roy and Sushant answering some of your questions. Right now, here comes the third question, and Dr. Roy, this is for you. Just like the third scoop of ice cream, it's where the fun really starts. So, you know, I know you've shared some examples, but do you have any instance in particular where explainability or the explainability feature of your AI model uncovered a really unexpected behavior and that added an interesting twist in your findings? So, do you have something like that you'd like to share with us? Something that really stood out? And this is stemming from the fact that today, generative AI is really rapidly advancing. Now, with models like GPT-4 adding voice and image capabilities, or let's say Qualcomm, AI processors, and enhancing personal devices, the world is changing. So, do you have something like that you've encountered in your experience?
No, absolutely great point, Nikhil. And yes, Jenny has taken everything under the as a storm, right? The reason that Gen AI is so popular today, or people are able to adopt it as compared to the other technologies which has come in, right? For example, the popularity of mm, metaverse or Web3 and so on and so forth, and blockchain, is about its nature of everybody being able to adopt it. It is comparatively much more simpler for people to get into, right? It is easier for people to design, develop, deploy on their own, right? And some people are talking about the fact that it can be just on one man army, right, who can go ahead and do everything under the sun, right? So that means you can solve an entire business problem in one go itself. Why? And I'll give you one or two of the probably one of the examples that are coming into picture. For example, as you said, right, multimodal, right? So that means, um, just for the audience sake, right, multimodal is number of modes, right, or the number of ways, the number of data points, right, that you would be able to use. So initially you was talking about just numbers or a structured data, then you came up with images, voice, video, sound, and everything under the sun, right? So one of the examples that I remember at this kind of point of time that comes into my mind, right, is we were developing synthetic data models, right? We were working on the synthetic data generation perspective. And what came into picture is there is no direct startup way, right, that can go ahead and tell us that this agent based RAG model can go ahead and tell us explicitly without a learning what it can come through, right? What is the kind of response that the survey would produce, right? And without any learning, without any previous learning. So what we went ahead and did is we look at the modalities of the previous surveys being done, maybe from a smaller sample. However, we induced every learning which we could get from a large language model, right, to provide the insights, right, or as been expecting. But we were not able to explain that. So while we got this into the picture, we utilized multiple combination of statistical methodology, one of them Sharp and Shapley values, because at the end of the day, it's a machine learning model, right? And it started explaining, along with the knowledge of the domain, right, which is primarily market research and so on and so forth. We have amazing knowledge with respect to that. That started comprehending. This is a question that we should be answering, and this is one of our breakthrough moments, right? The wow moment, that because before that we were just thinking that winter is coming, right? And in the languages of Game of Thrones, the winter is coming, and that's what we thought, that we will not be able to achieve what we are trying to seek through, and we're running short of time, right? Because everybody sees that just give the data to LLM and it will give you the results. You keep on fine tuning and do everything that you want to do in under the sun, but ultimately it comes to a picture where you would be able to utilize the actual traditional methodologies, mix it with the better, right? And that actually changed the game, right? We were able to not only just produce great results with training, we continuously keep on fine tuned. We created a feedback mechanism which through which we were having multiple agents do multiple performances together, and finally there has to be human in the loop. That created the trust in the system. So the system needs to be trusted, and to do that, you cannot just only use LLM to solve the problem. I guess that's one of the examples. There might be one much more that people will be encountering. But for a larger audience, do not trust only the model that you are actually bringing into picture. Look at the entire ecosystem, and you cannot build a machine learning system. At the end of the day, LLM is also a machine learning algorithm or a set of algorithms. But if you have to create a system which will actually create a value based trust methodology, you need to actually go in through all the channels, right? Focus on the traditional part as well, and then build the pyramid of value.
Thank you, Dr. Roy, for being very candid and sharing your experiences. I'm sure the audience would definitely appreciate this and learn from this. Sushant, I would like to ask you a question before we move to some of the questions we've received from the audience. So, while we've spoken about some of the findings that Dr. Roy had been in his experience, if you had to look at the future trends, what do you foresee in the field of interoperability for Gen AI models, and how are you preparing, in the work that you do, especially heading Gen AI initiatives, to adapt to some of these emerging trends?
Okay, I think if I look at the the trends right now, also, I think Dr. Roy can concur with me on some of the points. The one which very prominent example, if you think about, is LangChain. Okay, the projects like LangChain, I think they have revolutionized this particular space because they're providing a good standard frameworks and libraries which have really simplified the integration into your applications. Okay, earlier it was not possible. Hugging Face is also on the same spin. I think trying to bring more standardizations in the way the APIs are being leveraged. OpenAI has also started working in that particular space. In fact, a lot of research is different parts of the world, whether it's in America, China, Israel, where some of the new techniques like model distillation, transfer learning, which is already a very common technique used in the self-driving cars, and also multimodal learnings are happening just to bridge the gap between different LLMs. And there are some open source initiatives that are also in place. I think one of the project I could think about is Eleuther AI, which are also developing some open source LLMs and tools which can be modified by anyone in the community. So there are multiple initiatives are already in this space to bring more and more standardization, trying to democratize the things. In fact, Apple also announced today that they are also opening up their, if I'm not mistaken, maybe their 8 billion model. So I think gradually we are seeing, after Meta gone open source completely, in the same directions. I think they hinted about that in the WWDC event, which they hosted recently. So we are going to see a lot of open source models are going to come, and the way more and more open source community is going to get stronger and stronger, we'll see the community members start investing heavily in defining the standards, APIs, the standard frameworks, and the standard languages for these different distinct models to connect with each other.
Thank you, Shant. I'm done with my set of questions. On what I can see is, I can see a few interesting questions coming from the audience. So let me just open it up to you and Dr. Roy, and maybe y'all can pick out who wants to answer this, or both of y'all can go for these questions. So the first one that we have is, how can organizations balance the need for model interpretability with the complexity and performance of advanced AI systems?
Sushant, you want to take it?
Okay, I think this is a tricky question, because this is what we feel and face, in fact, on a day-to-day basis. Because one fundamental challenge that we always face is the data sparsity. Okay, especially when you talk in the context of the enterprise data, because since most of the organizations, as I mentioned at the beginning, are in the experimentation stage, and they are not letting us enter into their cloud ecosystem on day one. Everyone is starting with the private cloud setup, trying to carve out a small niche where you are testing with the sparse data, trying to bring in the synthetic flavor also in there. So we are not dealing with the complexity around the data at this particular stage. The more bigger complexity right now is how to blend the data sparsity as a challenge with the synthetic data, and then try to a problem which really moves the needle. Because ultimately, if there is no business impact, we are not going to see big dollars coming in this particular way. And we are seeing that fatigue has already started coming in the industry over the last few months. I've seen a lot of articles I've read where the business stakeholders are questioning the data science team that it's enough about efficiency gains and productivity gains. Let's start moving the needles now. Okay. So, and the more they push us harder on moving the needle, the more expectation will be arising on the explainability aspect, that if you are trying to make an impact on the cost or trying to make an impact on the margins or top line, you need to explain what are the underworkings of these models and how much I can trust on these outcomes. And Dr. Roy, I would love to hear
Oh,
of your
no,
recent.
you're correct, Sushant. See, organizations can balance interpretability with complexity and performance, right? How? They need to use a layered approach, basically, right? So you inherently should start with an interpretable model or a simpler component, and then integrate advanced techniques as and when needed. Don't start with an advanced thing just because I want to do an advanced thing, right? From that part. So, and then you need to use the explainability tool tailored to that complex model itself. Now I'll give you an example. For and so I think Heidi has also asked this question in the chat. I can see it because a lot of questions are coming in that space. Sharp and Lime have been traditional machine learning approaches to measure the output and the performance of traditional models. It is complex, it is vast, right? It takes time, it will consume a lot of computation power and resources and so on and so forth. Would it fit into Gen AI? No. So what you would need, what are the two major ones? And it's still a work of research, but two things have been coming out, and we need to again go back to our books, right? Everything is all about attention, as I said, right? Attention through visualization. So you need to use attention visualization models, right? Or frameworks. There are frameworks which are there. One of them, Sushant just said that Hugging Face has been coming up with it, right? Then you would use example based explanations. These two has been comparatively much more proven, and then you need to implement regular audit and feedback loops to at least ensure interpretability, which does not degrade the model quality. So you need to prioritize clear communication between trade-offs, right, to stakeholders. Like the decisions needs to be understood. The goal of the business model for which you are building the model needs to be approached. It needs to be aligned. It needs to be not only just aligned, it needs to be ensembled, and it needs to be adaptable by everybody. That should be the primary goal, which will address your transparency and trust, right? Because the sheer nature of SHAP and line can be very well used for feature attributions, basically, right? Which does not need to come into a complex game. So start with the building blocks, basically. Do with the machine learning part, then go into the GenAI for the machine learning engines, right? Of course, you need to have a better data. I'm not getting that discussion today. If you give junk, then you will get junk itself, right? Work on the data part of the game, and hence machine learning can come very active, um, whether the data itself is ready to go into GenAI, right? This is one of the most major questions, right, which is coming into picture. Is the data ready, right? Do we have a good data to train the model itself? This you can actually incumbent through a mechanism, for example, using the traditional models, right? And then you go into attributes of explainable models, right, into the picture. You use explainable based explanation, self explanatory prompts will come into picture, right? um, Agent specific explainable models is what you would use, because everything is going to be agentic, right? We are all going to get into that. So you need to approach this into every possible mechanism to try and find the unique characteristic depending upon the outcome that you desire. That's very important, because what you desire to get output is something needs to be very clearly thought through in your mind. And that's why a collaboration can only happen between data scientist and the business analyst, or a program manager, or a CXO, whoever is driving the entire piece itself. What do you want to achieve? Put that first, then build a model. As a DNA of a data scientist, most of us do want to only use the model in the first place. That's where I'll stop, right? I think that will get into integration of explainability as well as transparency.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. I know that we're almost on time, but what we could do is we could take just one question and maybe quickly answer that one before we summarize. So we have one from Tahir where he asks, how can the integration of explainability into AI systems contribute to build trust and transparency with stakeholders? Uh, would one of you like to take that?
See, as I said, right, what is more important to bring or foster trust and transparency is to understand the decision making process itself, right? The problem needs to be very well thought through, explained, and designed in the first place itself, right? The strategy has to be very, very clear, right, on what is the output that you desire from the model or the system, basically, right? Because you will always start with the proof of concept. In the proof of concept itself, spend a good amount of time to find what is the value, and then you need to utilize the reliability framework on top of the capability that you are bringing into the picture. So, like for example, when you are actually ending up with a proof of concept, you are actually would be deploying it. The first thing everybody thinks through is, okay, let's decrease the cost, right? I need as less of the tokens, and I would find the cheapest GPU provider, right? Or a provider who can give me the least amount of the cost. No, that's not the only thing. If you want to build confidence in your capability, you need to bring clear explanations. That's very important, right? For developers, regulators, right, you need to aid in identifying and correcting errors then and thereof. Develop methodology. We have a lot of co-pilots going around, right? Utilize them for yourself, right? You need to get into the compliance and ethical standards, right? Aligning with the system that you're trying to develop, right? At the end of the day, the AI system that you would be developing with any technology has to be interpretable, it has to be adaptable. It needs to enhance your current understanding, and people should be able to understand and explain it themselves rather than just doing a code part of the game. Coding is not the objective, right? You need to enhance the stakeholders' trust, but first you have to facilitate decision making through your methodology. Make it as transparent as possible. Get engrossed into how the model is developed. I would stick on to that.
And
Sushant.
two more things I would add there. I think one is, I think we need to contextualize the responses very well, because it's an example of manufacturing. Similarly, if you talk about life sciences, or if you talk about retail, so if the output of the models is not contextualized to that particular business function or that particular persona to whom you're targeting, it's going to be very difficult for them to comprehend. And secondly, it also requires a good lot required, because people needs to understand not just the cryptic language which is behind the scene, but also in a simple, digestible manner, which makes them invest more in the experimentation. Because the next 1.5 year is going to be more and more experimentation is going to, the experiments will happen more and more once people will start finding it easier to comprehend the output of these particular models. So I personally feel contextualization and a good amount of storytelling in the artifacts that we produce as an outcome is going to play in a very important role.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sushant. I know there are more questions coming in, but we are on time. So I would urge the audience to maybe drop us a mail on any other questions that we couldn't address during the conversation at the email ID that I shared earlier. That is scalewithgenai@cfi.ai. Uh,
But
Thank you.
one thing before you finish, Nikhil, I think Gaurav Mahajan has a great question, right? Zai, right? Zai has been there for some time. Explainable artificial intelligence, right? XAI, right? It's a separate offering. There are bits and parts of it, right, which has been there to measure the explainability of the AI system in a whole, right? What we are talking about today, right, which is getting into regulations, explainability, right, from an ethical and responsible standards, right? This should not be mixed along with explainability itself, because there is a lot of overlap and there is a thin boundary. Just wanted to cover that up from that perspective. Gaurav put up that question quite well. Yes, Zai is a big umbrella under which there would be independent developments which will be happening, basically. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Roy. Very kind of you. And Sushant, do you want to just maybe add something, or if you're good, then maybe we could just summarize and wrap up.
Point on the XAI piece is that I think at this stage, selling it as a standalone separate offering is going to be a difficult task. Okay. I think Dr. Roy and team do quite a lot of work on MLOps, LLMOps activity. And I think as we are building for our client, leveraging some of the open source as well as closed source LLMs, this has to be bundled along with that. I think we cannot just keep look at as two different lenses, two separate entities. It has to go hand in hand. That after you build your things, you need to have a clear visibility in terms of deployment aspect also, scaling it up also, ongoing monitoring aspect also, and also explainability also comes later on after that. But the more important thing is where we stand today in the industry is how to deploy these things in a more effective way
Yep.
and businesses to consume. Yeah.
Thanks, Sushant. Sushant, Dr. Roy, this has been a really, really insightful session. Today's chat actually showed us that generative AI is becoming as crucial as our morning coffee. And I still remember waiting eagerly for the new season of Game of Thrones. And I understand from today's session that Dr. Roy also, is a fan. Now it's AI innovations that keep us on the edge of our seats, making models not only smarter, but also more relatable and collaborative at breakneck speed. So, thanks once again to everyone who joined us today. We hope you found the session valuable. And for more insightful discussions on generative AI, do follow us on LinkedIn and stay tuned for upcoming webinars in the CFI Compass Gen AI series. Take care. Have a lovely day.